Righty-ho. The problem with this place is that you have traffic from early. Now, you see, I say things like, 6 months ago, I jotted things like, wow, I roam a territory, other side of this county. And that enhances your mental, well, you have to have a mental map, and it is really good for, your mind works in a certain way, which is different, and this sounds waffly nonsense, but it's like my head now is in, could I go far? If I go 7 miles west, there's a library there where I can charge up, and a bit of free food. So that free food pays for the petrol to go 7 miles west. On the other hand, I've got, because my life is about, I want to get working on making the website, etc., that I have a bit better. So what? I mean, website, but that's all you have. They are the modern day pamphlets. So I'm into the pamphleteering. The pamphlet that needs to go out. Nobody reads things, but anyway. The pamphlet that needs to go out is this massive PR. It's a national PR drive. You can see that it's already been captured by the by a kind of the smug, well-off elite. That's definitely the right way to do this. Attack the I mean, I can't stand. To me, Tesco is the enemy. Big supermarkets, we knew 40 years ago, are kind of the enemy of humanity. But attack Tesco, because Tesco have the essentially, with their various layers of corporate irresponsibility, in other words, not being seen to specifically Tesco subcontract a financial concern that funds the building of these massive, because the cost of the chicken sheds along the Wye is immense. So they have to be funded. They've been funded by an organisation, a company, an entity, who have a relationship with Tesco, but it will be firewalled specifically for dealing with retaliation. So it's like, have a legal case against this entity, and what do they call it? Avara, yeah. Yes, of course, that's the way. It totally and utterly fails to deal with the fact that the cause of pollution in the Y2, but pollution is not something, you shouldn't ever look at pollution as a localised matter, i.e. affecting the Y. All the rivers up and down the marches, which all of them over 25 years I had a certain amount to do with, like a lot to do with. The Arrow, for 3 or 4 years, 10 years, like, what's really going on with there? I investigated it, and the bottom line is, you see, you can talk about everything else, but the Arrow, which is the next valley up, when everybody was moaning in spring 2020, I randomly, it was almost like a magical quest, a part of the magical quest, I encountered a man, I shan't name him, Mark something or other, who lived on the River Arrow. It's actually his wife's property. He was an aristocrat. He owned, his family for many years owned fisheries, fish processing organisations in the northwest. And they, with their money, they had a house, a holiday house, but over more than 40 years, on the River Arrow, 2 miles downstream from Kington. And he told me, and he was a fisherman. Now, at the end of the day, there are very few people. The green people cannot communicate accurately and straightforwardly. It's always been the problem. That kind of rabbit in the headlight, but also there is this element of, oh, we've got to be spiritual because spirituality is going to see our way through this. I totally believe there's something else, but I don't know what it is. So Mark communicates with me. I have a recording of it in April 2020. He, being one of these obsessive aristocrat fishing, hunting people, and he was all right, and he'd even read Tolstoy I was reading the book Resurrection by Tolstoy, April 2020, when I met him about half a mile. I was sitting by the bank of the River Arrow on a beautiful sunny day. Everybody else had gone bonkers. I'm reading Tolstoy's Resurrection. Magnificent, beautiful, wonderful book about resisting truth to power. Mark, in our great conversation, explained to me told me he'd even read it in the original Russian. He's one of them, okay? Jealous of him, genuinely. Not in an elitist way. It's like, wow, because this book is almost like a Bible. It's about putting aside your ego. That's what that book is. Anyway, so Mark tells me during the conversation, which I always lead because I've got no time for anybody anymore in Britain as of about 10 years ago because all environmentalism has failed. I don't blame the big companies. I blame the more thoughtful people. So during that conversation, Mark was telling me how he keeps a stockbook for 40... stockbook is the wrong word. Just an observation book of the fish in his river that literally goes 50 metres from his house. And his wife owned the land around it. She's from a wealthy family in that area. And he said that 40 years ago, it was pretty good condition, more or less pristine, and cataloguing over 40 years all the life in that, the fish life, all the life, what's the correct word? The biota, or whatever you want to use, all the life, plant, fish, crustacean, etc. Over 40 years, I asked him the question, so give me a number. And he simply said, over 40 years, all of that total life has reduced by 98%. It's almost all, it's gone. It's essentially gone. So that river, the River Arrow, next valley up from River Wye. Why? Because stuff going into the drains, because the catchment area up from where this place was, the location 2 miles northeast I believe it is, downstream of Kington, Herefordshire, is far less, there's far less agriculture and far less housing than the Wye Valley, and yet that river's dead. It's a really, really, really pretty, you can't call it wilderness, but it's pretty, very low population density in the whole of the catchment area of that river, and no, or virtually no, chicken sheds. No, already it's the stuff, the careless use of chemicals at home, including in the home. It's like cleaning your car on the front drive in such a way that you're using chemicals that are going to end up in the river, going down the culverts, etc. The whole interconnected web of how people are using stuff. Stuff sounds like a silly juvenile, silly Extinction Rebellion girly word. No, it just anything that's a man-made molecule, anything that is a molecule brought in to that region that have been through factories, whatever, and it can be, it is everything from the eyeliner, the deodorant that all men are now obsessed with. Nobody used deodorant 40 years ago. The whole damn thing, to the materials, the chemicals used on vehicles, the outdoors of houses, absolutely everything. And then the far, far more increased use of washing machines, Man-made fabrics. Oh, no, I don't use man-made fabrics. But there's some in there that end up in washing machines that I bet you 30 years ago, the average household washing machine went on once a week, maybe even once every 2 weeks. Average is a very difficult word, but a kind of 2 parents, 2 kids, that washing machine didn't go on that often. Nowadays, most ordinary households will have it on 3 times a week. And dishwashers, the whole damn thing, all the chemicals. I mean, I knew 40 years ago, use a scouring, metal scourer or something like that on a dish. First, you don't need any chemicals. You don't need any soap for that. You soak your dish, you give it a rub, you rinse off almost all the material off the detritus on your plates or your pans, whatever, and then give it a quick last little go with a bit of soap. You can act in such a way that you're minimizing anything that's not a naturally occurring chemical in that area, naturally occurring molecule in that area, because that's what it comes down to. You've got to literally train yourself from day one to be doing that. Right, so anyway, the point of this is, right, so my environment, right, yeah, I'm going that way, actually. I've run out of water. Rather, I failed to think when I was at a stream yesterday to fill up my water. There's batteries down there. There's one up. I can get to the library here for a few hours. Blah, 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 blah. Why have I even put this camera on? Because this being totally on the edge for years, it is a kind of mindfulness. I mean, now, that's the horrible word. Right. It puts you totally in this present. And also, the little sprinklings of real joy are when you kind of beat the system. Now, I don't want to really even use these words because I actually am going to try now. No, I'm not going to try. I have been jotting for 2 or 3 years. What are the ingredients to having an existence where one does not fall into depression? It's the wrong word. We must stop using this word. Okay? It first appeared. It was basically popularized by Thomas Hardy. In my late 20s, not deliberately. I noticed how often this book appeared in. I read everything by Thomas Hardy. My first self-starting look at the British culture, and it's in there very frequently. He is the person. I don't think it's not in George Eliot. Thomas Hardy, around that period, writers started to use this word a lot. So, how does one not fall into this mental abyss cave? And it's a hurtful place. And because I've managed to, no, not managed, you see, that's the wrong word. I realised 30 years ago, I'm never going to fall into that cave again. Now, it's all very well realising that, but then you have to prove, it has to be proven, and over particularly around the period of 2003 in my own life, 2003-4, when I went through really hard stuff for 6 months, no, a year really, exhausting, nobody to help, my whole life over, blah blah blah. And then ditto in 2010, 2011, ditto for a few months in 2016. 2018, I should say, spring 2018. But by that time, it's like, no, that was actually the worst period. But what is the ingredient? What are the ingredients? And it is, and there's an element to this, which is getting several small joys every day from just having so little, knowing you don't want very much, kind of give you a little bit of, it's almost like little bits of nourishment. But I don't want to put it that way because that diverts off the main point, and the main point is truly, I was somebody who 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, even then, despite knowing I was cured of ever having any problems like that, I would nevertheless be so on top of my daily making sure I'm keeping my phone bill down by using this alternate dialing service. There was, what was it called? OneTel, I think. Just figuring the angles to keep myself functioning on a lowish budget always. I had a small limited company that was never going to make any money. It was just a bookshop and online book sales. So having a kind of personal, ongoing, pretty close tether on everything, I must be so careful. I do things in the most contemporary, economical, smart thinking way. We didn't use the phrase smart thinking 25 years ago, but I was the king of that. And gradually, by about 10 years ago, I realised I'd given up. You have to give up part of it. I lived, as of 10 years ago, moved into somewhere, was it 10 years ago? No, it was 11 years ago. Moved into somewhere for the first time ever with a pay card electrical meter. And I said to myself, everybody knows that electricity is 50% more. It's like, I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm going to actually, rather than spend my time doing this horrible thing of switching, and which I used to do all the time. As soon as I discovered that you could do that, 27, 28, probably even 30 years ago, that's how we do it. No, it gets too much. You end up spending too much time looking into a computer. I don't use the phone for that kind of thing. Looking into the computer and figuring, and then bits of paper and bits of letters and bits of email, sign up for this, change to that. This is it's not something I want to dwell on, but that was my whole mode, and I was terribly self-satisfied with it. I was bloody brilliant at it. Bloody brilliant. I had to look after, as of 25 years ago, the mother of my child couldn't deal with any of this stuff. She wasn't first language English and wasn't very good. Not her fault at all. I had to deal with all of that. As of 25 years ago, we took on a small shop that I had to use as a bookshop. I didn't want to. It was for her to do a different kind of business, but it failed and she couldn't deal with it. It wasn't her fault at all. It didn't cause any real stress to me. It did to her, actually. But anyway, I had to turn it into a viable, mainly using the internet, book-selling business. I had to buy stock, blah, 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 blah. So I had to deal with all the finances, the processing of a rented commercial property with a bank loan, 3 or 4 different services, accountant, limited. In fact, we were VAT registered as well because the turnover was quite high from a certain kind of book ordering that I did. I had to deal with all of that, absolutely everything. I had it so sorted out over time such that it worked. It was viable. And the house, etc., etc., etc. I became so good at it. So I was proud. I've managed to keep my overheads down so well. I'm the king of this, of just getting by in a humble way, on the edge, and having to keep all the finances ticking over without any capital. I was the king 10 years ago, 11 years ago, and it hurt. It actually almost hurt when do you know what? No, I'm not going to get into that situation again. If my electricity card meter runs out, I know exactly where I am. I can deal with that. There's a library in town, I can go and charge something out. If I've run out of money and I can't afford to put anything in that electrical meter, that pay meter, and after a little while I realised It's not about being total tramp, total zenny tramp, but part of you letting go of it. And then by about 6 or 7 years ago, it's like all you ever hear through Radio 4, through whatever, is, oh, you've got to take advantage of these. The only way you can get by now, you've got to use that independent supplier for electricity, and then they'll give you a lead-in offer, and then a year. But nobody says, oh yes, but a year later they're going to become the least economical when your lead-in offer expires, so you're going to have to change to another. No, I've stepped aside, but it's part of you. It's like part of me. I've given up part of that person I was. I still, because I use data, I'm going to have to, this is going to be 7 fucking gigabytes. It's like, well, I want to find the most economical data. I spent a lot of time on that over the last 2 years. Where I lived, you couldn't basically use data prior to 2.5 years ago. So I'm free. I'm better off being in this vehicle. I lived right aside. There was no phone signal. So, blah, blah, blah. That's part of the cure. But it has to be, even that, just me using the electrical key meter. I know that the unit cost of the electricity I was using was probably twice as much as even my not very intelligent underclassish neighbours. It's probably at least 50% more. But I let go because it's like I knew, right, apart from the unpleasantness of all of that administering, keeping one's electricity cheaper, it also causes bits of stress, bits of hunch, bits of knotted shoulders. That's what it causes. Let's not use the stress word, okay? Just as we shouldn't use the word depression. It causes knotted shoulders. That paradigm. So I let go. And then after a year or two, it's like, hey, I can let go of being something I was so good at, such that I wouldn't even consider getting into that mode in respect of most of my life. This is a bit of a difficult one. I have the most economical insurance in Britain, which is NFU, and of course I priced around. But I wouldn't think of now looking for a different supplier. It's just too much. I want my mind, creativity, and I don't want those hunched up shoulders. That's what it's about. You've got to find the balance, and the balance is way, way below the optimal for the most economical. I'm just looking under that bridge. Is that mermaid there? I would like to see the mermaid. Anyway, now I haven't said very much, but by the way, the last thing I want to be in the whole world is any kind of anybody's guru. I'm never going down south. I go down south. I wouldn't go down south more than once a year. It is purely about writing, which then may be supported. No, maybe is the wrong word. I read Richard Maby's Nature Cure. I felt it was important, although waffly when I encountered it. But I needed to see the whites of his eyes. I needed to see his authenticity over a period of time to really believe in it. And I don't believe in it. Over the years, I'm not seeing, I've heard him speak now and again, I'm not hearing from Richard Mabey that 1000% his, or 100%, his cure worked. My cure, but one doesn't want to sound messianic, I didn't speak to anybody as of 30 years ago when I'm going through a process, well, it's actually 35 years ago, of over 10 years, letting go a bit of my old self, doing major things, stopping being I'm the only person who's handed in I say this, it's slightly figure of speech, but it's actually true. I can't get back a commercial pilot's license. 25 years ago, when my daughter was born, I handed back a commercial pilot's license. I let it lapse, and it gets to a point a couple of years later where it would cost an absolute fortune and I'd have to go on new courses and do all the exams again. That kind of hurts. But after a few months, I realized it was the best thing I ever did. I did do it to A, smaller scale commercial aviation is not compatible with my daughter's future. A. B, these lifestyles are no good for you, or rather, I wanted to be around with my child when she was born 25 years ago. So it's like, no, it's not compatible. Within a few years, all of these changes like that, all of them, they hurt, really. Even if that one, you kind of hide the hurt, but then a year or two later, you realize, oh, thank God, I managed to not be me. That's what it's about. You never, though. You see, that's a terrifying thing. You never lose the core. I've realized this over the years, that there's such poor writing and communicating about the self and psychology and childhood and growing up. No, all of us have that. The person we were, 12, 13, 15, 16, is who we are. It's a large part of us, always. Just some most straightforward characteristics. Like, I was really shy as a teenager and uncomfortable. Nowadays, I would have been termed somebody who had, what do they call it? Social anxiety. I found alcohol aged about 16, and that cured that when I had some alcohol in me. Now, for over a decade, I definitely would have been termed nowadays as social anxiety. It takes years, and you don't do it deliberately, but that can go. I don't have that now. I'm not perfect. I met somebody I really liked yesterday, and we were having a really good talk, and I just had a little bit of breathlessness. That's very rare. It's a couple of times a year, but it was purely, I don't know what it was. It's hard. It's almost, anyway, to keep to the point. But I was aged 12. I was a quiet, humble revolutionary. I had to take myself out of my parents. I didn't even know what I was doing, but I had to take myself outside my parents' extremely bourgeois existence. Although I realised I had an almost a unique childhood in that they had an extremely bourgeois existence in a place where there was a region for many miles. There was nobody else like them. I felt it kind of was an affront to me, and I didn't like it. It's like, why are my parents like this and nobody else around? Blah, blah, blah. So, point being, it's like, one, I know I've transited classes. That's what I did. Inadvertently, but age 12, 13, everybody else in my family was in or had been to private school, essentially. I got myself to the local comprehensive. That was it. It doesn't feel like a revolution, but it is. It's a massive total. I'm the one who refused to go to private school, went back into the comprehensive school, and my people, my kids, in a region where you did not have rich kids at all, my friends, my peers were all humble, ordinary. My life changed about age 13. So, like that, you can call it revolutionary, or you can call it what? It's like, I don't have a people, because even to them, even to my people who became my people, you're still the one, he's the one with the slightly posh accent. He doesn't talk about his parents, but his parents have got a really, really fancy car. We see it sometime around, James Bond car. So it's like, that's who I am. I am essentially the aside person, or the island. If you're an island, I realised this, I kind of started to think of or try and quantify the words. If you're an island, which I was, because you can't actually transit classes, you end up in an island in the middle. If you're an island, you're an island for life. That's it. That's who you are. You can't be mindfulness therapized, read Eckhart Wanker Tolle or any. I've read all the philosophers, all of them. You can't find a way to the other bank. That's what you are. And the point is, you're not looking for a way to the other bank because you are that island. You have to accept it. You don't find a way to the other bank. I've found ways to not have social anxiety or feel uncomfortable about meeting new people. But that's, well, no, but you are an island. That's what you are. And you're also lonely, but then you have to, throughout life, you have to find new ways of being with people, which is positive, which I have done in life. But that's your core personality. And of course, many people, as we know, they fill that loneliness, whatever it is, they fill the hole with booze or something else. I did that off and on for long periods. Anyway, up until the age of 27, then almost entire Puritan plus recovered from the hole. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. Why have I even started to talk into this? Because, yeah, all I care about, actually, if I care about other people, it's that they're not suffering any kind of depression, stress, or anything like that. Because I never do. I've found they're not clever keys. They're not Jordan Peterson's clever 12-stepsy thingies. I've just found ways, and it's ways that I'm gonna have to write it properly. If I come up with the ways, I'm going to have to keep the camera off because this is the disaster. This is the disaster for everything. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. It kind of works at a certain level, perhaps the Socratic dialectic method, talking into a camera. But it's the gentle thoughts that are what's the right word? It's the gentle ways. When I wake up in the morning, even today, I ran out of money. I'm going to have some money in a few days. It's like, oh, I'd like to go and see my one friend over there, but maybe I'll leave it. I'd like to, It's like, where am I? I'm here now, dealing with now only. Gotta go and get some water now. 4 kilometers up that way. That's the cure, really. But it's not the full cure. The full cure is also knowing. I know. It's an intellectual thing. It's not a spiritual thing. It's an intellectual thing. I know all the pointers, all the science. The science is that human beings are better off if you've got a kid in close proximity to one another. If you've got a kid, you're touching that kid continually. That's good for you. That changes your mind, body, soul, everything. Being close to people is better for you in all kinds of ways. The touch, you realise, or you don't realise because it comes about you gradually. The touch actually biochemically improves you. Continual touch, not a little bit of touch, not going to dance classes 3 times a week, doing the bloody tango. No, not that. The continual touch, that changes you for the better. So it's about a balance. I do not believe in the atomized, individual, I'm all right here soul. But the reason I can deal with it, I suppose, is because intellectually, rationally, long ago, and in my own case, it's been people don't legally pick on you if you're in a couple, or it's far, far less likely to happen. That happened to me 14 and a half years ago. And it happened because I took up with somebody. I was attacked. Because it could be seen that was a good relationship. It could be seen. Attack. Because people know if you're a couple, you're a stronger, more look after your own back entity. More dangerous. To them, to the bourgeois or whatever-ness. So intellectually, I internally preach, categorically, you try and be part of a couple. it's more than rational, intellectual. It is what human beings are. I mean, and all these fucking mermaids and yogas and fucking this, they entirely, because they're cowards. They're cowards. Don't have the guts to be honest about the reality of the human-shaped biome. We are a biome, a collection of many organisms in one sack. Right, got to turn this off. Run out of battery.